Well, as you can see, it is a beautiful day here in mid-December. The finest time for motorcycling when you can't feel your hands, your nose drips and you can't rub it and it drops in your mouth and it's all horrible. We've all been there, but I could not care less because a motorcycle like this is enough to warm the cockles of even the most frozen heart. Raised from the ashes of their proud heritage to make motorcycles once again in the 1990s, MV came back to life under Claudio Castiglione, who got the whole thing going again. Now, no flies on him. He thought, we want to make a beautiful sporting motorcycle, who should we get to do it? He brought in Massimo Tamburini, the man behind the 916, and he is responsible for penning this fine design we see here. A bike so singularly beautiful, it has earned itself a place in the Guggenheim Museum in New York, and to be honest, if you had the cash, which let's face it, most of us don't, but if we did, how nice would it be to have one of these in your living room? It's the kind of bike you can look over for hours. Every time you look, you find another detail, another dinky little feature that you didn't see before. Now the best thing about it is, however, it's not just all show and no go, because not only does this motorcycle look so beautiful, but it works as well. Who would have thought it? One example of the way MV have managed to combine form and function with the F4 comes from the front of the bike. Not only is it incredibly beautiful, and not only have they managed to stack the headlights one on top of the other, as you'll notice other people are now doing, check out the 2003 GSX-R 1000 for an example, but they've managed to give the bike an incredibly narrow frontal profile. Now what this means is it's going to cut through the air very easily, the aerodynamics are going to be boosted, which is a good job because the motor, although it's a 750, it does need a little bit of help anywhere it can get it. So this is one area where MV are assisting this bike to perform. And perhaps this has something to do with the old days of the factory when the original boss of the original MV company, Count Domenico Agusta, he said that racing must come at the expense of the production line. So the heritage in this thing is racing first, road second. Like I said earlier, the motor in here is a 750cc inline 4. Now, just before we go on to that a little bit further, just have a look at how narrow the front of this bike is. How have MV managed to slot an inline 4-cylinder motor into something as narrow as a Ducati 916? It is a marvel of modern engineering, and perhaps only they truly know the secret of how they did it. But to get to the guts of the thing, 750cc, inline 4, radial valves designed in conjunction with Ferrari, plenty of trick bits in there, decent fuel injection. It is a little bit fluffy, below about 8,000 RPM, but there's a nice top end to play with, goes up to 13,000. This is a bike you need to keep stoking on the boil, more like a 600 to be honest, than a 750. And in terms of pure performance, you're looking at around about 115 horsepower at the back wheel. Now that really isn't a great deal to write home about, and in a straight line or pretty much anywhere else, a GSX-R 750 will murder this motorcycle. However, that's not all there is to it. This has an element of desirability and exclusivity that the GSX-R will never match.
Now some manufacturers, like Ducati, build bikes for the track and then produce a road-going version. The Japanese, on the other hand, tend to do it the other way around and produce a road bike and then develop it further by taking it racing. Aprilia, for example, build their sports bikes on experience and have plenty of it. They spent years and fortunes racing in the GP paddocks around the world and have come up with bikes like this one, the Aprilla RS125. It's a perfect example, and it's the nearest thing you'll find to a 125 GP bike out there on the road. It's a fine looking specimen, isn't it?
However, clever Aprilia long ago noted that youngsters held a keen interest in race replicas which were potentially accessible to them, being learner legal, low on capacity and horsepower. And parked up outside the corner shop, the little Aprilia possesses those movie star looks, and it's only when you slip the key in the ignition that people aren't quite so impressed.
Now in restricted form, the RS125 sounds and feels fairly flat. In fact, you have to rev the nuts off the little blighter just to stop it stalling, especially when you're at the traffic lights. But saying that, when you are at the lights, if you like a full-on race-style start, then this is certainly going to put a grin on your face and really cheese off the bus driver.
On de-restricted form, the whole moving issues become somewhat easier. From the moment you thumb the electric start button, which is something you don't take for granted on a small two-stroke Sportster, you can hear the motor breathing freely as the revs climb with far more enthusiasm than the restricted version. Revs up, the smell of two-stroke around you, and there's no way you can behave. These bikes throw you into a false sense of security. With little change in the sound of the motor, you continue to wring the little bugger's neck, and before you know it, you're moving off at a fair old pace. Thank God for the fruity 32mm front brake, accompanied by a chunky 4-piston caliper. A bike that weighs in at around 140 kilos proves little challenge for that Brembo setup. Now, this is where the bike really scores points in the handling department. Nothing you can throw at it will prove too much. Their lack of weight allows you to quickly flick them from side to side, and once over in a corner, the bike remains stable and beautifully balanced. But at around £3,800, these bikes are a long way from value for money. But unlike the Sax, the little RS responds well to tuning. Fully de-restricted, it already kicks out more than double the power of the Sax, and there's plenty room for more. Beware.
Now in restricted form, this bike's performance is reasonably average, but it's one of those bikes where the more you put in, the more you get out. Now in de-restricted form, it's a different story. It still can be quite hard work, but you get it on those twisters and it will be in its element. But I tell you what, your right wrist might ache a little bit from keeping those revs up. Overall, I think it deserves 7 out of 10. And so on to value for money. Well, I'm afraid the RS125 doesn't fare very well in that category. It's priced at around £3,800 for a new one. And if you're a youngster just starting out on a bike, you probably haven't got that sort of money to splash around. And if you are older and have passed your test, I mean, let's face it, half the fun of this bike is being able to de-restrict that. And you won't be able to do it if you've not passed your test. So, I'm sorry, but it looks like 6 out of 10. As for build quality, well, that's a different story. The RS comprises of high quality components and is fashioned in a way only the Italians know how. You know, this frame and this swing arm, they belong in a museum, and for that it earns itself 8 out of 10. And as for the comfort factor, personally, I love it. The seat's well padded, it's a nice, comfortable stretch to the handlebars. I'm not overstretched. The tank not only looks beautiful, but it's very well sculptured and the legs fit nicely underneath the tank there, rest easily on the foot pegs. Just overall, it's just so comfortable to use. The clutch is easy, the gear lever, everything falls into place just as it should. And for that, I'm going to give it 9 out of 10. Now let's talk street cred, shall we? If you're 16 years of old, there's nothing better out there on the road. But if you're from an older generation of bikers, it might be a bit of a different story. You may be embarrassed firing up a small-hearted bike that looks as if it can really talk the talk. Do you know what it reminds me of? It's a sheep in wolf's clothing. But it looks the biz, and for that, we'll give it 8 out of 10.
Welcome back to the MV Agusta. It may be the case that you do have to work the gearbox hard on the MV if you really want to get a move on the thing, keep the bike zinging in its top end. However, you'll be pleased to find when you do this that the gearbox is very, very sweet indeed. It is light, it is precise, doesn't miss gears. The only buggerance is trying to find neutral at a standstill. But what do you expect? It's an Italian motorbike. They all do that, sir. They'll call it character. One area the MV will gladly outdo the GSX-R 750, however, is on the anchors. 6-pot calipers, 310mm discs, it's a very sweet setup indeed. The feel from the lever is a little on the soft side, but what you realise once you start giving this bike some stick is that you are getting an awful lot of power and feel back through to your hand. So we come to handling. What of it? Well, I can tell you that having ridden this bike for the last couple of days, I've learned next to naff all about it. The only thing I would be pushing in these conditions would be myself into a hedge. I didn't really fancy doing that. Now fortunately, in the last 3 years, I've ridden a few MVs on various circuits, road tests, that sort of thing. So, what do we know? Well, this is very much, or at least it can be, a precision tool. The frame, the swinging arm, they are beautifully taught, give you bundles of feedback, and really, the buzzword has to be precision when it comes to cornering on one of these. Get the motor zinging, buzz through any corner you fancy, absolute slice through them, like a knife through something sharp. Anyway, I say it can be a precision tool because if it's not set up right, this bike doesn't respond very well. Often as they come, they are on the soggy side. I've even ridden tricked up ones with proper Öhlins units in both ends. They don't necessarily actually help. All you need to do is make sure that your rear shock and your standard forks are finely fettled and that your tyres are in good nick. If they're squared off at all, like they are on this one actually, it's a real nasty ride as it sort of wobbles along and drops into corners. Not very pleasant at all. One other thing about this motorcycle is it may be an inline 4, but it does not sound like any other 4-cylinder motorcycle you can buy. When it comes to practicalities, this motorcycle truly is as practical as a chocolate teapot. Now for anyone who's confused, that's to say it is incredibly impractical. The mirrors might as well not be there. You can see a little bit of the road behind you and a lot of your elbow. But if you want to see any traffic behind you, forget it. It's not going to be in shot. The riding position works well on the track, works well when you're going for it, works well when you're tucked in. It's a disaster in town. It will cripple your wrists, it will hurt your knees. You're not going to enjoy it at all. You can't take a passenger, but that's good. You don't want to share this discomfort with anybody. Best of all, they've cleverly managed to set up the handlebars and those dinky little inserts in the fairing there so that you trap your thumbs completely if you get the bars near to full lock. So just beware, you're going to hurt your thumbs if you try and do a 3-point turn on one of these. So, not a very practical motorcycle. But then who cares when it looks as darned horny as this? Truly, this is a motorcycle that leaves me in two minds. On the one hand, the sheer beauty of the thing, the innovation that's gone into it, and the fact that it can still get a wiggle on when it wants to and handle as well as it does, really does give me the But it's £12,000, it's incredibly impractical. And also, outside of the motorcycling circle, you really don't attract that much attention on it. Anyone who's into their bikes will stop, their chin will hit the floor, you'll feel very happy with your purchase. But if you just want to get some general recognition and people's heads turning, spend 12 grand on a Harley.
If you know anything about biker culture, you've probably heard of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, one of the longest established and largest bike clubs in the world. If you know anything about the Hells Angels, you've probably also heard of Sonny Barger, one of the original founding members of the Oakland chapter, now seen as an elder statesman for Hells Angels worldwide. I've come down to Santa Pod Raceway to meet Sonny on one of his rare visits to the UK. Sonny, welcome to England. I wonder if you'd tell us a little bit about how the club was originally formed and what aims you had in mind in those early days.
Well, the club, I believe, was originally formed off of the name of the Hells Angels Bomber Squadron, which was stationed right by here, I understand. And that happened in 1948, before my time. When I got in the club, we formed the Oakland Charter and became part of the Hells Angels, just looking for a club to ride with, a brotherhood, and having a good time riding motorcycles.
I have this impression from reading the books and some of the things I've seen in the movies that you played a key role in taking the club forward and developing it. Is that fair?
I think I was instrumental in helping. Although the club was going for 8 or 9 years before I got in it, they never really had the notoriety they had until, well, I should say the notoriety started after I got in the club.
Right, okay. You must have seen lots of changes over the years since you've been riding bikes. What do you say is the biggest difference to life on bikes now to what it was in your early days?
Well, you can ride in much further distances.
Right.
I mean, you know, like in the 50s, if you got 300 miles a day, you really were doing well. Today, it's nothing to get 1,000.
That's because of breakdowns, is it? And better reliability?
And, rigid frames.
Right. It must have been pretty uncomfortable riding around on those rigid frames.
Well, we didn't know it.
I believe you also appeared in a movie acting alongside Jack Nicholson.
Well, we did, and you know, I mean, this is going to sound funny, but we didn't act alongside of Jack. At that time, Jack Nicholson was in a movie with us. Right. That was his first movie. He wasn't a star, and we were the stars, and he was working in our movie.
Looking at the books, lots of famous names crop up, particularly in your autobiography. Names like Allen Ginsberg and Hunter Thompson and the Rolling Stones. As a survivor of the 60s, how do you regard some of those people now?
Some of them I still see, some of them I like, some of them I didn't like. Some of them I don't even talk to today.
In the new book, there's the reference to Steve McQueen and David Crosby of Crosby, Stills and Nash.
Well, Steve McQueen I never did know as a person, you know, not on a one-on-one basis. The information to write the story came from his wife Barbara and all the photos that were in there, so I never did meet him in person.
Right.
Now Crosby, yeah, we knew him. He was a character. He's a good guy.
Yeah. Would you like to say a bit more about that? We'd love to hear what he got up to.
No, he's had enough problems. He don't need any with me talking about what I know about.
Have Harley Davidson Motor Company asked you to join in their centenary celebrations next year?
Davidson would rather I didn't even ride their motorcycle, let alone come to one of their functions.
But as such a famous figure, you must have brought some great publicity to the brand.
Well, I think the thing of it is infamous, not famous. Famous guys like Harlan Ness and them, who, you know, they became so famous in the building and such of aftermarket Harley-Davidson motorcycles that Harley has to accept them. But they don't want to accept my lifestyle at all. They want to make money off of it, but they don't want to admit they're part of it.
Welcome back to the MV Agusta, here at a tropical and balmy Phillip Island racetrack. I wish. Performance, 7 out of 10. Anything that looks as good as this does not deserve to go as well as it does. In pure terms, a GSXR 750 will eat it for breakfast every day, but a GSXR 750 will not have the exclusivity or the charm that this little baby does. Build quality, 5 out of 10. Beautiful she may be, robust she is not. You can thrash this motorcycle, you can enjoy it, but just bear in mind, little bits and bobs are probably going to fall off here and there. So you do need to treat it with kid gloves and look after it completely. Styling, 10 out of 10. Ciao bella. What else can I say? This thing is a rolling work of art, it's a showpiece. If I could look as good as this every morning, do you know how happy I would be? Brilliant. Comfort, 4 out of 10. Put simply, it is not the MV's strong point. Thrashing it at the track, caning it down some back roads, getting a move on, absolutely excellent. You don't notice it, the riding position works very well. But slow down a bit, go through town, do a bit of commuting, try and do the shopping, forget about it. Value for money, 5 out of 10. 12 grand, that's a lot of money for a motorcycle in anyone's book, but when it's as beautiful and as exclusive as this, that can often be enough to swing it. Just bear in mind, however, you'll get 10 times the attention riding a Harley for the same money.